Welcome back, students, to iTTV's lesson of Biology Form 4. Now we're going to take a look about cell specialization and the concentration of certain organelles in the cell. Okay, students. Some students will be thinking that every cell in the planet has the same type of organelles and it will have the same concentration of these organelles. That's not the case, okay? Why? Because certain parts of our body, for example, our biceps and triceps, they help us to lift more weight and do more work. So these cells need to have more energy. Requirement of more energy will result in the higher concentration of mitochondria being found there. So now we want to take a look at how certain parts of our body and certain cells have adapted specifically to cater for its own function. And because of their special function, we can see that certain organelles will be found in high densities. In other words, can be found more than in other cells. Let's take a look at a few examples. As different cells perform different functions, the density of certain organelles found in the cell is related to the specific function of the cell itself. The first example that we have is that there is an abundant amount of mitochondria found in the midsection of a sperm cell because it needs a lot of energy to swim towards the ovum found in the fallopian tube. Let's see an example of the sperm cell now. Students, this is a basic structure of a sperm cell. The sperm cell is divided into three parts: the head, the neck, and the tail. Now, back when you were in Form 3, you would have listened or learned about the sperm cell. Now, let's just imagine that you have never heard anything about the sperm cell before in your life. Never once you have seen this structure, never once you have heard the name, nothing, zero. Okay? Clear it all out of your mind now. Now, I have a question for you. Imagine that as we were walking along, and all of a sudden, we found a sperm cell. I know it might be far-fetched, but let's just imagine, okay? I found a sperm cell. I catch the sperm cell and I take it off. And I see that the sperm cell is already dead. The cell is a dead cell. Now, because my initiative to understand what is this all about, what I do, I take it back to my lab and I decide to place it on top of a microscope. And now, as I view through the optic lens of the microscope, I can get a magnified version of the sperm cell. Now, as I am seeing closely, I can watch few specific details about the structure. Although I don't know anything about the cell, I can start making smart guesses. What are smart guesses? Hypotheses about how the cell works. Let's observe. I see that the cell in total has a majority of its mass encompassed by the head. That means the majority percentage of the mass is in the head. Now I take a look at the head and I see that the amount of cytoplasm is very less. And I can also find out that the majority part of the head is filled or compacted with something known as the chromatins. Still remember what was the function of the chromatin? Correct. Carry genetic information. Now, where on earth can I find a cell which has the majority of the mass comprising of the chromatin? What kind of a cell can have this? The cell has got to be a reproductive cell, correct? Now, this is my first guess. I think that this is a reproductive cell. Why do I think that? Because of the amount of chromatin that I find in it. Number 2, let's move down here. Okay, I can see that there is a tail in the cell. Now let me imagine, why does a cell need a tail? What is the function of the tail? You guessed it right. The tail helps it to carry out point number 2, movement. Very good. You guessed it exactly like me, right? Okay. So now we can guess that because it has a tail, this cell can move. What else can we know? Let's improve more. All right. Now let's list down a list of animals or anything on the planet that uses its tail for a movement. Some students will tell me a cat, a monkey, a tiger. Does a cat, monkey and tiger use its tail for movement? Nah, they use their tails, their legs for movement, not their tails. The tail is just to balance their movement. Now, what about animals that really use the tails for movement? Example, fish. Very good. A fish uses its tail. Now, where does a fish live? A fish lives in a liquid medium, water, right? So, in that same concept, I can say that this cell also requires a liquid medium to move. True or false? We are just making a guess. True, okay? Now, because it has a tail, I think it can move. And because it uses its tail for movement, I think it needs to live in a liquid medium. Good. Let's go to the last point. Let's take a look at the neck here. As we observe the neck, we can see that inside this neck area, there is a large quantity of mitochondria. All right, a large quantity of mitochondria. So let me just label capital M for mitochondria. Okay. Now students, observe carefully. Why would this cell need so much of mitochondria? We already learned before this in our theory. The function of the mitochondria was to generate energy, carry out cell respiration, provide the cell with enough energy, right? Now let's put it all into a nutshell. The cell has a tail, so we know that it needs to move. And in order to move, it needs to be active. How does it become active? By having a high concentration of energy inside it. Now, which is the organelle that is in charge in producing that energy? Mitochondria. So can I make a conclusion and say that because this cell has a large quantity of mitochondria, I'm going to say that this cell is point number 3, active cell. Now, let's take a look at the 3 points that we have listed. We said that it's got to be a reproductive cell. We said that it can move because it has a tail, and it also requires a liquid medium to move. And we also said that it's got to be an active cell because of the amount of mitochondria found in it. Now, think back the days when you were learning your Form 3 reproduction chapter. Was all this true or false? Now, even if I was a person who never had any introduction of the cell, if I had no basic knowledge about the cell and its function, I can still guess by making smart hypotheses kind of ideas based upon its structure. And it will be definitely correct. Now students, why am I giving you this kind of an insight? Now because biology is a very tough subject. You'll have to know that. You have already picked biology because of your interest. You probably have picked biology because some of your work that you would want to do in future involves the knowledge of biology. Now, in order for you to be successful in SPM biology, it's going to be hard. For you to score your A+, is going to be a challenge. Now, sometimes most of us will read and read and read. Some of us want to be better, so what we do? We do lots of exercise, we push ourselves to the extreme. But then again, on the day of the exam, can all this information be loaded in your brain ready to go? No, sometimes it just doesn't happen. So in times when you feel that, oh my goodness, I read it somewhere, but what's the answer? I can't get it out of my head. For days like that, what do? You go with your gut instinct. You go with the smart guesses. Look at the questions, look at the structures that there are in front of you, and start to make sound ideas based on your experience in life. That's what I did, and that's what I got right in my sperm cell knowledge. Now, let's look at another example. The leaf is the site for photosynthesis in a plant. Thus, the palisade mesophyll cells near the surface of the leaf contains an abundant amount of chloroplast to trap light energy from the sun. So, students, the next organelle that we are going to see belongs to a plant cell, right? Let's take a look now. Diagram number 2 that you have in front of you here is an example of a cross section of a leaf. What is this? It's a cross section of a leaf. What is a cross section? Most of us are new to these ideas. Let's see what's a cross section. Imagine you had a leaf, and the leaf had veins, right? Now imagine that I cut the leaf across. What did I do? I cut it across. When I cut the leaf across, this part of the leaf and this part of the leaf are two separate parts now. So let's say I have this part of the leaf with its veins still intact, but now because it has been cut into two, I can also find a region here, true? If I take my point of view from here, this is what I will see. So what section is this once again? It is a cross section by looking from this corner. Now, as we can see the cross section of the leaf, let me give you an introduction on the parts that you can find there. This will repeat itself in the following lesson as well. Alright? Now watch attentively so that you can get it really into your head. The leaf comprises of a row of cells. You see this little row of cells here. This is known as the epidermis. Students, the skin provides protection for the plant or the leaf. There is a row of upper epidermis and another row of lower epidermis. In the bottom row of the epithelial cells, you will find something known as guard cells. What are they? Guard cells. Guard cells, you can still remember from your Form 3 days, can't you? Remember the process transpiration? Good. Now, guard cells control an opening. The opening is known as, you guessed it right, it is the stoma. Okay? The opening is known as the stoma. Now, who controls the opening and closing of the stoma? Guard cells. Awesome. Next, below the upper layer of epidermis, we can find an entire layer of cells. These cells, can you see, they are elongated? Elongated. Can you see that they are elongated? Good. Now, because of their large size, they can contain a lot of different organelles. Okay? Now, one specific organelle that can be found in high concentration in this group of cells is known as the chloroplast, the one that we were looking at earlier. So let me put a capital C for the chloroplast. Okay? Good. This row of cells are known as the mesophyll palisade cells. Recap. Where can I find mesophyll palisade cells? I can find them on the upper layer of the leaf. Where? Upper layer of the leaf. Very good. Now, why did the upper layer of the leaf, also known as the mesophyll palisades, contain so much of chloroplast? You guessed it right already. By now you should be able to find out. Sunlight reaches the leaf from the top. Correct? Now, when sunlight reaches the leaf has to absorb the sunlight and carry out a process called photosynthesis in order to make its own food, which acts as a storage of energy. Good. Now, if I was to keep my chloroplast on the lower end of the cell or the leaf, would it be of any use? No, obviously not. That is why we have large concentration of chloroplast kept on the upper surface of the leaf known as the mesophyll palisades. Can you see how the concentration of certain organelles influence the function of the certain cells? Right? Good. By the way, those of you who are looking at this, you'll be wondering, why didn't I touch about spongy mesophills? Spongy mesophills are found randomly inside the leaf. They have large air spaces around them which acts as storage for carbon dioxide gas. Sunlight, carbon dioxide is also important for the photosynthesis process. So I think you basically got an idea of what I'm talking about. Let's now move on to our third example. Okay? The pancreas is the organ which synthesizes the digestive enzymes and hormones. Therefore, pancreatic cells have a high density of rough endoplasmic reticulum. Let's take a look at the diagram now so that we can explain in detail, okay? Say for example, this is a rough description of the pancreatic cell. Very good. Where can I find pancreatic cell? In the organ called pancreas. Awesome, guys. Now look. In a pancreatic cell, we can find large quantities or high density of RER. Once again, students, what is RER? RER is rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now, for those of you who are wondering, why did we call this a rough endoplasmic reticulum? Imagine I'm a blind man. So when a blind man touches this area, he will find that the outer surface is smooth, correct? And if I was to move on to the inner surface, I will find that it's got lots of bumps, lots of bumps. These bumps are caused by ribosomes. Ribosomes are important to carry out protein synthesis, right? So, the rough endoplasmic reticulum is in charge of protein synthesis. Now, if the pancreatic cell has a large quantity of RER, what does that mean? It means that this cell is actively carrying out protein synthesis. Since all enzymes are proteins, what happens next? Watch, I will describe the story very briefly to you. Pay very close attention. You will see this again, okay? Now, information is kept in the nucleus or the chromatin. The information from the nucleus is used to build new protein molecules around the rough ER. So new protein molecules are built here and they are passed to the Golgi apparatus. Upon reaching the Golgi apparatus, these proteins will be modified. Once they are modified, they will be thrown towards the plasma membrane. Can you see? They are thrown towards the plasma membrane, encapsulated in vesicles. So once again, information is kept in the nucleus. Protein is synthesized based on that information. It is transported and sent towards the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus modifies them and packages them into vesicles. What is inside the vesicles? Enzymes, modified enzymes. Now, the vesicles will move towards the plasma membrane. I have a close-up for you here. Watch. Upon the vesicles reaching the plasma membrane, what will happen is the vesicle will combine to the plasma membrane. Can you see the combine to the plasma membrane? Good. Next, what happens is the enzymes which were kept inside the vesicles are now let go outside the cell. This is how the pancreas secretes something called what? Enzymes. So, when you were in Form 2, when you were learning the chapter called nutrition, people used to tell you pancreas secretes enzymes into the pancreatic juice which will flow into the duodenum. So you never knew how is it that the pancreas would secrete the enzyme, right? This is how it is done. Once again, let's just recap. What kind of an enzyme does the pancreas release? Remember LUT. Remember LUT. L-A-T. LUT. What is LUT? LUT. L for lipase, A for amylase, and T for trypsin. All these three enzymes will be produced and secreted from the pancreatic cell. Alright, students, since we have already seen the entire segment and we have seen a lot of examples, let's carry on with our assessment so that we can see whether or not we have already completely mastered the first and second episodes of our lesson 1. Okay? Question number 1. Compare and contrast the structures of the animal and plant cells. Students, now you're getting into a new world of structured questions. This is a structured question, right? Now, when you see the words compare, then it means that you will have to tell between the similarities and the differences. If you hear the words differentiate or contrast alone, then you can move on to just seeing the differences between the two cells. Alright then, let's take a look at the answers. Animal cell and plant cell similarities. Both has nucleus, cytoplasm, plasma membrane, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, ribosomes and Golgi apparatus. You have been very aware of all this since our first diagram of the cell. Next, let's see the differences between animal cell and plant cell. The first difference is between the shapes of the animal and plant cell. Animal cell has an irregular or non-definite shape, whereas a plant cell has a regular and definite shape. Now students, there are two ways to write this answer. You can write them in the table form that you are seeing, or you can also write them in an open essay concept. That means you keep writing them in a sentence, full stop, next sentence, full stop. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is I will show you the table format and I will read it aloud in an open essay format. So I will be using sentence connectors, so just pay attention to my voice. Okay? Let's take a look at the second point. In an animal cell, cell wall is not present. However, plant cell has a cell wall which is present. Next, in an animal cell, chloroplast is not present. However, in a plant cell, chloroplast can be found. Next, there are small but numerous vesicles found in certain animal cells, whereas there is a large central vacuole present in most plant cells. Finally, food is stored in the form of glycogen molecules in animal cells, whereas food is stored in the form of starch molecules in plant cell. So students, some of you might think there are more other differences that are not listed down here. What about them? Let's list them down. Now an animal cell has centrioles. An animal cell also has lysosomes, which you can't find in a plant cell, right? True, but because in most of our exam questions, maximum of only 5 differences will be expected from you. So we try to list down the 5 that is important for you. Alright? Good. So let's go to the next question. What are the functions of the cell wall in a plant cell? This is quite easy, isn't it? The cell wall gives shape to the plant cell and provides mechanical support to the cell, preventing it from bursting during excessive intake of water. Next, predict the density of organelles which match the functions of the following cells. Flight muscle cells in birds. These muscles have a high density of mitochondria. Once again, the bird's muscle has to be of high intensity. That means they will have to produce a lot of energy to carry them in flight. So they will obviously need a lot of mitochondria. Next one. What about the cells in the meristematic tissue? Found in plant shoot. Now cells in meristematic tissue have a high density of chromatin and mitochondria. In the tail of tadpoles during metamorphosis, there is a high density of lysosomes. Now students, why must there be lysosomes for the tadpole? Now watch this. When a tadpole is growing into becoming an adult, it has to lose its tail. And in order to lose its tail, it can't just like pluck it off and throw, right? So what will happen? Lysosomes will be sent to the tail to digest off the tail. Therefore, it loses its tail and grows into an adult frog. Awesome, isn't it? Next. The mid-region of the sperm cell contains an abundant amount of mitochondria. State the function of the mitochondria in the sperm. The mitochondria provides energy which is needed by the sperm cell to swim towards the ovum in the fallopian tube. So students, I believe that with all these assessments and all that explanation, you must be getting quite excited to see what's coming up next, right? So for now, this is good enough for you. Keep all this and do not forget them, alright? Thank you for watching iTTV. Till we meet again in our next lesson. Bye-bye.